We've heard some amazing stories today, stories of challenges, some pretty sad and horrific stories. And I was just saying before, I'm not sure that my story measures up. But the good thing about my story is that I'm going to start at the happy place and try and lift the spirits up a little bit. So I want to take you back only a few years ago to the 8th of March, 2011. It's pretty specific. Some of you might think, that date sounds familiar. 8th of March. It's International Women's Day. And for International Women's Day this year, that particular year, I was living in Singapore. I was what we call an expat wife. Yes, sounds lovely, doesn't it? Or as the new politically correct term is, a trailing spouse, where I trailed behind my husband with a 1-year-old in tow and very heavily pregnant. But that was in 2008. By 2011, I was starting to live the expat life, and I was theoretically, again, on the outside, loving it. But this event that I went to on International Women's Day was actually the highlight of my week. While everyone else was swinging by on their way to their glamorous jobs, it was the best thing that was going to happen to me that week because there really wasn't anything too fantastic going on with 2 little toddlers and all the stuff that surrounds that life. Some of you will be familiar with it. But of course it was in Singapore, so it's sunshine and palm trees. You get the idea. It's all looking good on the outside. And the New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, Singapore, had put on this event. And the speaker was the Trade Commissioner's wife. Sounds very la-di-da, doesn't it? Well, I just knew her as Barbara, but before I went to that event, I didn't know that Barbara was a very well-respected public speaking coach. So I sat there, all excited for my event of the week, and I remember her story. And so in a way, my story has started with her story. And she was talking to us and saying that when she was a mother of a very young child, still at university, she remembers being at an event, something political, and listening to these amazing women speak. And she sat kind of down the back and went, "Ooh, I want to be like you." And in that instant, I thought, "Ooh, Barbara, I want to be like you." Well, Lady Luck was shining on me because Barbara wanted to offer free coaching to 3 women to speak at an event that the Chamber of Commerce would put on later in the year. So you know what happened to my hand when she said, "Who'd like to take me up on it?" I went, "Yes!" Like a desperate schoolgirl. "Yes, pick me, pick me." And she did. And so a few months later, my first major speaking event was like this, in front of a group of women that had come to hear me speak, but it was at the High Commissioner's residence. But it was an amazing start to a journey. And I thought, well, I can't end it here. I've got to do more with this. So I joined the Toastmasters Club of Singapore. Now, I'm a lazy person by heart. They served dinner, so it was all good to me. But another Lady Luck came along. She's a great friend of mine because there were speakers and coaches and trainers in this club. And so all of a sudden, despite my coaching with Barbara, I had to keep getting better and working harder because I wanted to go home with a blue ribbon, which meant best speaker of the night. And so I kept trying to get better. Now, as trailing ex-spouse wives do, I wasn't supposed to work, but I managed to get a job within about 6 months when I applied as an international relocations consultant. Well, I applied, but they didn't have any jobs. But she said, "We do need a new workshop presenter. Would you like to do our workshops?" "Would I like to do your workshops, Michelle Keating?" "Yes, I would." "I'd love to be paid $30 an hour." "Yes, please." And so began my public speaking professional career. Now, trailing spouses often have to trail back to the country they came from, and so we moved back to New Zealand. Into 2014. I settled the kids in, I became part of the community, I renovated the kitchen, and in 2016 I said, well, what am I going to do now? Because I'm feeling like I'm not doing much. And so SpeechMarks Coaching was born. Now, SpeechMarks Coaching had one very important thing that it started to do. It went to Venus networking, and all these amazing accountants and lawyers and beauty therapists were fantastic at what they did, but they couldn't speak up. I could barely hear them say anything about what they did and why they did it. And so my mantra for helping women speak up and be heard started to be born. Now, I'm sure you've heard something along these lines as you came up to this event. Women speaking up? Well, why do you need to help women speak up? I mean, they're all born talkers, aren't they? Yes, I have heard that from a few men. Now, I'm gonna get it. You know, my daughter, who's the younger one, was basically teaching her older brother to talk because he was in speech therapy. And sometimes I even still to this day go, oh, please, little less talking. But the problem is that even though we have established that little girls do speak a bit more than the boys, we start to adopt a seen and not heard kind of attitude. You see, there are primary school teachers that are brave enough to admit that they love the girls in their class because they sit up and quiet. And they'll put up their hand, won't they? They'll put up their hand to answer a question, even though the boys shout out, oh, well, he's answered it now, never mind. And so we start to get subliminal messages about not being heard. It's not necessary that because we're being told off directly, but subliminal messages. And then we add into things, other subliminal messages, like, oh, such and such, you're being like a girl. And all of a sudden being a girl is a bad thing. And the campaign, Like a Girl, that's actually a very clever one that's involved with Procter & Gamble. I invite you to have a look at their series of videos and have a look at this, because it's an amazing study of what it means to be like a girl and whether that's a negative thing. Because you see, girls' confidence takes a plummet, more so than boys during puberty. And if you were lucky enough to get through high school and think, you know, I'm okay, I'm all right, the exam results tell me I'm just as good as the boys, or even luckier that you go to university or tertiary education and the exam results and the assessments still tell you that you're just as good as the boys, then you might have had it delayed a little bit so that by the time you're in your 20s, you suddenly have a bit of a, oh, actually grades don't matter anymore. Just speaking out and being confident and putting up your hand and giving it a go counts, but I haven't done that for a long time. And this is where the confidence, that lack of confidence and self-belief starts to paralyze women, and they don't even necessarily know it. Okay, some of you don't look convinced. I get that. I mean, it didn't start for me in my 20s. It happened over a course of time, but somewhere along the line, I lost a bit of my voice. I just wasn't so sure about who I was. I wasn't always this confident speaking. So it's a real problem, and I really wanted to figure out with my Venus woman and other women why this happened and how I could help them. So, of course, like a lot of the other women here, I did a bit of a study. I found that women started to do things like adjust to fit in. They do things like go, oh, I don't want to be the only woman in the office that says out loud my opinions. I might just kind of hold back a bit. I might not speak up in the meeting because none of the other ladies do, or the guys are starting to think I'm one of those girls that speak up and always have to be heard. So some women, obviously no one here anymore, we wouldn't do that to ourselves, would we? They actually start to hold themselves back. And here's a good quote, because we love a good quote, don't we, ladies? It says, for those women's general tendency to shy from self-promotion for fear that they sound like they're bragging is a key barrier to their advancement. I mean, no one likes a braggy woman, do they, apparently? Enough of that. But what does this do? Because it ends up that we end up having the imposter syndrome. We've heard of the imposter syndrome? Anybody willing to admit they've had the imposters? Oh! No, there's a few. Good, I'm glad not everyone has had the imposter syndrome. So I want to back it up with a bit of solid research. Women have a tendency not to speak up as much as their male colleagues. There's something going on there, but the great news is it can be helped. An event like this is starting to prove that it's got some huge benefits. But the thing is, in 2019, diversity and inclusion, boy, weren't they the catch cries? Everywhere it was all diversity and inclusion, diversity and inclusion. If you had a job in diversity and inclusion, you were so on trend. Because it's nice, isn't it? It's only fair that we're 50% of the gender mix at board levels or at management levels. That's fair, right? Well, I've got better news for you than it's fair and it's nice. It makes business sense. Oh, goodness me. It makes good business sense. So this is an American one. And see, single gender teams are in blue. Funnily that. Single gender teams. So this is just so you know, for legal teams, they found out that mixed gender teams outperformed legal teams. Oh, so now we're getting some metrics around it. This is helpful. I was reading an article by a female African-American architect. There's probably only a few of them in the whole of the United States. And she's head of her company's diversity and inclusion. And she said the great thing about having gender diverse, religious, racial diverse teams is that they start to reflect the client. And of course, the potential client, when you're pitching, loves it if they know that from a religious, cultural, or ethnic, or gender background, you can really understand it. And I think in a room full of women, I can say, we can all tell the toilets that have been designed by men in a shopping centre or an event centre, can't we? Because the queue for the men's is in there and the queue for the women's is out here. So we like it when the architects and the builders understand us. But more recently, I was listening to Diane Edwards. She's, and I apologise to Diane for not knowing her full title because saying she's head of HR is probably a little bit inadequate, but she works for the Ports of Auckland. And she was telling how when they decided to resize the job of a stevedoring is the fancy name for the people that take the cargo on and off the ships and the wharfs. Now, traditionally, obviously, it was pushing it up on carts. But these days, if you can climb to the top of the crane, you can pretty much do the job because it's a technical, fine motor skill job. They found women that were willing to give it a go. And after some pretty rough months of settling in, these women started to realise that they were good and they could be better than the men. So they gave it a go. And what happens when women start outperforming men? Wow, the men start performing. And that's what happened. The whole team's results picked up. Now, there's lots of common solutions to diversity dilemmas. Quotas, we don't like those in New Zealand. We prefer targets. There's policies and reports. We love those. And of course, there's conferences. 40-40-10 is an often split if it's not 50-50 gender. And of course, awards. And I love awards, but I do hope that my 11-year-old girl will get to her 30s and go, those women's awards, Mum, what were they all about? Well, we don't have those anymore. I really hope in 20 years that, in a good way, they'll be a thing of the past. You see, these are some of my women that I have, one with Kath Vincent, who's in the room as well. An architect again. Getting better at public speaking gave me the confidence to speak up. Very important. Or my little favourite, Pip Bunk, the first woman who won the Woman in Trades event, where I coached her to give a speech. She was shaky leaf, and then the next year, she was on the panel at the Woman in Leadership Symposium, and I was in the audience. That's what it did for her. And now she's changed career and had that strength to do that. Because these women went through what I call the public speaking confidence cycle, where the public speaking gives you more confidence, and you do another speech and you get more confident, and all of a sudden you find yourself, like many of these women are for the first or second time, standing here with a confidence that they know they can tell their story and be heard. So I would like you to feel the love of the public speaking. See what it's done today. You have seen that. You will be able to project the confidence, knowledge that you'll be succinct. Very important when you're talking to men, by the way. Answer the questions. You'll be able to understand the power of body language and maybe even walk the walk. And you'll become more visible. And that's ultimately what we want. We want to be visible. We need to be heard. So I encourage you, and my message for you today is to not just sit here and listen and feel inspired, but to do something with it. Support the woman that you think's got a great story and should be heard. Encourage her to tell her story. If you haven't told your story, then take the challenge and in some way tell your story, because the boost to your life and to others will be amazing, and I promise you, you will never, ever regret letting your voice be heard.